Police abuse remains one of the most serious and divisive human rights violations in the United States today. The horrific images of Rodney King being beat by the LAPD are one of the most blatant reminders of police brutality against innocent victims. The excessive use of force by police officers, including unjustified shootings, severe beatings, and fatal chokings, and unwarranted use of tasers persists. This special insider-exclusive investigation discovered that police brutality is persistent and rampant across America, and that systems to deal with abuse have failed, and that victims seeking redress face daunting obstacles at every point in the process, ranging from overt intimidation to the reluctance of local and federal prosecutors to take on brutality cases of officers who have committed these human rights violations. Today, the insider-exclusive investigative TV series goes behind the headlines in Police Brutality, Carlos Pacheco's story, to investigate a police brutality case against the NYPD and how some rogue police officers beat, handcuffed, and tasered a 27-year-old epileptic young man, Carlos Pacheco, while he was suffering from a seizure. Carlos' attorney, famed New York civil rights lawyer Seth Harris, partner at Burns & Harris, successfully got the truth and got justice for Carlos with a verdict of $1 million against the NYPD. On September 30th, 2006, Carlos' girlfriend, Christina Sanchez, had telephoned the 911 emergency response service for help. That's right, help for Carlos. And police officers soon arrived and yanked Carlos out of bed following his seizure and rear handcuffed him, then strapped him to an EMS chair by his chest and legs. A police sergeant, James Sutter, subsequently arrived, and Sutter repeatedly used his taser to subdue Pacheco, tasering Pacheco in the stomach and chest area as well as in the back, while Pacheco was rear handcuffed and strapped by a lap thigh belt and a chest belt to an EMS chair. Remarkably, the officers claimed Carlos was unnecessarily hostile, but there was no complaint of any criminal activity. And remember, the police were responding to a 911 call for medical attention. Pacheco was never accused of any wrongdoing nor arrested. So why was he beat and tasered? According to the American Medical Association and American Epilepsy Foundation, epilepsy is a brain disorder which can result in changes in body movements, awareness, and emotions. About 2 million people in the United States today have epilepsy. The psychosis, when it emerges, can be sudden and the behavior can be extravagant. Typically, hallucinations and delusions are noted. Prominent are persecutory and religious phenomena. Well-directed violent attacks are seen in about 25% of the episodes. As Seth has often said, the problem of police brutality against the mentally and physically ill is much more widespread than most Americans are willing to admit. Our nation practices a selective blindness. In this great and strong nation, we have all become unwitting accomplices to the continuation of the conflict. Seth has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in New York and in the nation. He has seen many innocent and hardworking people become victims of police brutality. He understands that police brutality is one of the most serious, enduring, and divisive human rights violations in the United States. The problem is not just in New York, but nationwide, and its nature is institutionalized. And because of that, Seth is driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. He learned a long time ago that if a man hasn't discovered something he will die for, he isn't fit to live. His goals, not only to get justice for his clients, but to make sure all Americans have the right to a fair trial, honest cops, impartial prosecutors, and fair judges with no agendas. Because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And justice and power must be brought together so that whatever is just may be powerful, and whatever is powerful may be just. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from New York City at the law firm of Burns & Harris. It is my great pleasure to introduce Seth Harris to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Tell us a little bit about your firm. What kind of cases do you generally handle?
Yeah, we handle all kinds of personal injury matters. Civil rights litigation is one of our specialties, so to speak. And basically anything that involves a physical or emotional injury, we'll get involved if it's the right kind of claim.
So basically you represent what we call the little guy, right?
Always. It's always the little guy. It's never the corporation. You know, corporations don't have blood. They don't get injured, and
One of the things I like about the stories that we do is you take cases of people who can't afford lawyers, haven't got the slightest chance, and yet you gamble. You like a case, you think they've got a good cause, you believe in it, and you expend time and money. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but one of the reasons we're here today is a case that you won, which concerns Carlos Pacheco. Tell us a little bit about who Carlos is.
Carlos is a young fellow who has had a history of epilepsy over a large course of his life, and he'll tell you about that. But never any prior run-ins with the law or anything of that nature. Just sort of a regular guy, but with a severe disability that has caused him to require a lot of hospitalizations over his short lifespan so far.
And back in, I think it was September 2006, he had an epileptic fit. His girlfriend, Christina Sanchez, called 911. She called for help. Police officers showed up. What happened then?
Well, you should know that in the past when that had occurred, police officers had not showed up. Ambulances arrived, they took him to the hospital, cared and treated him, and that was pretty much the end of it. Nothing unusual there. On this particular occasion, for some reason officers showed up first before the ambulances arrived, and they really had no training or background on how to deal with anyone with epilepsy.
But they should have, right?
Well, if they were going to get involved in recovering him from the apartment in a safe and orderly manner, absolutely.
Or called somebody who does have training, right?
Yeah, they could have just stood by and waited for the ambulance to arrive, but they chose to take action.
And what kind of action did they take?
Well, it really borders on the bizarre at that point, Steve. I mean, the officers come in, the poor fella is just ending a seizure in his bedroom. In his bed.
And sometimes these seizures can be kind of violent, right?
They can be, although this was more of just you know, the eyes rolling and that sort of thing. And he's now in a fetal position in his bed under the covers. Well, the officers want to apparently move on to their next assignment and get this assignment completed quickly. So they are rustling him in the bed to, you know, get out, basically. Let's go.
In other words, they want to take care of business and finish it up right away.
But he's in a mental state, he's not able to move. He's actually not even completely conscious when they walk into his bedroom. And because he's not cooperating with their commands, and he's in this fetal position in his bed, they decide to yank him physically out of the bed. Very bad idea for somebody who's just had an epileptic seizure. In fact, you can trigger another seizure, which is ultimately what occurred in the next couple of minutes. So.
And then they pulled out the taser.
Well, they pulled out the taser, but before they did that, you should know that they got him into a EMS chair after EMS arrived. The police are trying to physically get him out of the bed. And this EMS chair, if you've ever seen them, they're the kinds that have straps over the laps and the chest. And at that point, he begins to struggle a bit because he doesn't really know what's going on. You know, he just had the seizure. And now these people are strapping him into a chair, and he's not liking that very much. But they do get him strapped in. And it was after that that the taser came out.
Totally kind of unnecessary. I mean, you've got him totally restrained. Why do you need a taser?
I mean, it was basically what they did was is they turned this EMS chair into an electric chair.
Now, when this case was brought to you initially, tell our audience what your strategy was to get justice for Carlos?
Well, you know, the city of New York had a view that this was not a very big case. I mean, because you know, what were the injuries?
Yeah.
You know, in my legal field, you're always evaluating the injuries. How severe are they? Mm-hmm. In this particular case, he had several burns over his body from the tasers.
Yes.
That resolved themselves. By that I mean they healed.
Yeah.
So, you know, what was the big deal, according to the city?
So your strategy was to kind of paint a picture that this man was incapacitated because of his epileptic seizures, and the police reacted very badly.
In my opinion,
Incorrectly.
That's true.
Illegally.
Illegally, correct.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, they have a unit called ESU, the Emergency Services Unit, that's apparently trained on how to handle somebody with a emotional or psychological disability that's acting out in a way that the regular police officers can't handle.
Right.
All you got to do is call them. Apparently ESU was called, but they never showed up.
Tell us what happened with the verdict. What kind of verdict did you get?
Well, this was a unusual verdict in that they didn't only choose to compensate Carlos for his pain and suffering.
Yeah.
They also chose to award punitive damages.
Yeah.
Damages to punish the officers for what they did.
Yes.
And in that regard, the punitive damage verdict was $1 million.
Yeah.
And then they also compensated him similarly for his pain and suffering and what he's expected to go through. Because you can imagine a fellow like him, with regard to the limited recall he has, it's something that he still thinks about every day.
Sure.
It affects his everyday life.
Yes.
And for a man with his epilepsy, it did him no favors at all.
And he thinks twice now, or a lot of people might think twice when they call 911 if they have an epileptic fit, that who knows what might show up, right? And who knows how you might be treated.
Here's the problem, constitutionally. You have the 14th Amendment, right? Deprivation of life, liberty, and property.
Yeah.
The officers, when they take custody of people, and in this particular case, no crime was even committed.
Yes.
By their own admission. Carlos wasn't, he didn't rob somebody.
Yeah.
He didn't assault anybody. He just merely had a seizure.
Yeah.
They have no medical training to care for anyone who's in their custody.
Yeah.
So now, you know, you're left with basically officers who often, forgetting medical school, a lot of them haven't been to college.
Yes.
No medical training or anything in their background.
Mm-hmm. We are fortunate today to have Carlos with us, so I want to bring him on so he can tell personally what happened. So let's do that right now.
Perfect.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Carlos Pacheco to the show. Welcome to the show, Carlos.
Hello, how you doing?
Boy, you went through a lot, didn't you?
Yes.
What do you remember of that day back in September 2006 when your girlfriend called 911 to help you out?
Yes, well, I remember one thing that I will never ever forget was waking up with my feet handcuffed to the stretcher and my hands handcuffed to the stretcher, and me just asking one of the cops why I'm here. My hand is hurting, can you please take off the handcuffs? And all I remember seeing the taser coming down to my chest.
Yeah, you had obviously other epileptic fits throughout your life and never been treated like this before, right? So this was like you didn't understand what was going on, right? And when you asked the cops what were they doing, what was their response?
Nothing. I didn't hear nothing. I don't remember nothing.
Yeah.
Besides that taser coming down to my chest.
You could definitely feel that.
I could definitely feel that. I'll never ever forget that day.
Well, it's lucky, it's fortunate that you met up with Seth here, because there's a lot of people who wouldn't know what to do, you know, if something like that happened to them. How are you today?
Today I'm okay.
Are you?
It's not the same when I'm in the hospital no more. I get a little nervous when I'm in the hospital on the stretcher bed now.
Yeah.
You know, don't like to close my eyes.
You're afraid it might happen to you again?
Yes.
You think twice now about calling 911?
Yes.
Do you? That's unfortunate.
Yes, it is.
Hopefully maybe the police department, as a result of this case, has some different procedures that they follow. like calling that, what is that, ESU?
The ESU unit, that's been on the books for quite some time.
Yeah.
But even beyond the ESU, you know, just wait for the ambulance to get there.
Yeah.
The seizure was over.
Well, I'm glad you could come here today to tell this, and hopefully other people will not experience the same misfortune that you did.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
No problem.
We are fortunate today to have the 911 caller, Christina Sanchez, with us, so let's bring her on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Christina Sanchez to the show. Welcome to the show, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us what happened that day when you called up 911.
Well, the morning, he was catching a seizure regular. He usually gets seizures. And I called 911 and they told me, what's the emergency? I said, I need ambulance assistance.
You had done this before?
Plenty of times.
Okay.
My husband is having a seizure.
Yeah.
He had went through about 2 of them already, 2 episodes. So they told me, okay, they'll be there shortly. The cops arrived first.
Usually cops don't show up, right? It would usually be an ambulance or EMS or something like that, right?
Yes. But the cops showed up and they started taking it into their own hands, trying to wake him up and stuff.
Did but you told them that he suffered from epilepsy.
Yes.
And they could see that, right?
Mm-hmm. They can see it clearly, and I told him, he's going to have another one, you shouldn't touch him, because after a seizure, he starts to mumble and stuff, so you can't understand him really.
So what did the cops say to you?
He told me, well, we don't have enough time. We don't have time. And they lifted him off the bed and they threw him onto a chair that I had in the house. So then I started panicking because I had my little daughter with me.
Yeah.
So I said, you're not supposed to touch him. This ain't supposed to happen. We're supposed to wait for the ambulance. So he told me, don't worry, we got this under control. And at that time, the firemen came in.
Right.
Like everyone showed up before EMS. So at this time, my house is jam-packed, and I'm screaming, no one's supposed to touch him but EMS.
But they're not paying attention.
They're not paying attention.
Did they have you off into a corner someplace?
They had me by the door.
They wouldn't allow you to get any closer?
No, they wouldn't let me get any closer. And then he started catching a seizure in the chair. So I started screaming, he's catching another seizure.
Yeah.
So they told him, they started screaming, stop resisting arrest. And they tied him to the chair while he was catching the seizure. So he was jerking, his body was jerking, the chair flew back. And they lifted the chair up and they threw it. And then they started screaming that he's assisting arrest.
Yeah.
And that's when they called for the sheriff. And when he came in, that's when everything started. He started jerking the taser, and I was screaming for them to stop because he was catching the seizure. And they started tasing him.
Yeah. If I happened to be that cop that shot your husband with a taser, and I'm here right now, what would you say to me?
You destroyed me emotionally. I don't trust any cops anymore. My daughter, you let her see her father like that. That's what kills me the most.
Yeah.
And everybody says, how do you feel? Why do you feel that way if it didn't happen to you?
Yeah.
It happened in front of me and I was helpless. I couldn't do anything about it because I was scared that they were going to hurt me if I tried to interfere. So all I can do is just talk. Don't do it, scream, how I felt, but I felt helpless. So.
Yeah. I'm sorry this happened, but I'm glad that Seth is representing Carlos in this matter.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very, very much for taking your time to come here and tell the world the nightmare that you lived through. Seth, police brutality in many cities, including New York, seems to be a real big problem, isn't it?
It's a huge problem, and it doesn't seem to be getting better, Steve. It seems to be getting worse.
Well, you know, when you have lawyers like yourself who win big verdicts against the city, you know, cities are basically broke today. So where are they getting this money to pay, and is anybody really even monitoring some of the serious problems that are in the police department?
Great question. The budgets for the city and for their officers always seem to be limited or being trimmed back.
Yeah.
And you would think that with a verdict like this, as well as several others, that they would say, hey, wait a minute, we've got to either pay police officers more that are better qualified or train them better. rather than paying out these verdicts constantly.
Yeah.
There seems to be no relationship between a civil verdict and increased or better training, and I don't know why.
Is racism a big problem in a lot of these cases?
I think it's a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes it can be overplayed,
Yeah.
and sometimes it really does exist. And of course, it's unfortunate when it does.
Yeah.
But I think that it's more about us versus them within the field. And they can rationalize what they do because it's us versus them. That's really the problem.
Yeah, generally, are a lot of these officers disciplined because of their actions?
Yeah, when they talk about discipline,
Yeah.
they're talking about a 5-day suspension, 30 days at a desk. I don't consider that much of a punishment.
No.
It really amounts to very little.
Thank God that there are lawyers like you who take these cases, because the bottom line is, without you and other people leading the way, people like Carlos, Pacheco, and others would have no recourse against some of the abuses that the police have. And I'm thankful we're here today, and I want to thank you for being on our program too.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.